Gabriella Van Rij is an accomplished born in Pakistan woman who speaks 3 languages, works with large multinational organizations, and knows how to push through fear and self-doubt to live the life she once dreamed about when she was a young, scared orphan. Her journey so far inspires her to rail against bullying, racism, and other adversities. It is my pleasure to welcome Gabriella Van Rij to Studio 4 to tell us more. How nice to meet you.
Hi, Fanny. Thank you for having me.
What a journey so far. And if I was to say your whole name, it is Gabriella Nassim Akhtar Van Rij.
Very good.
Yes. Take me back to your early life.
Born in Pakistan, presumably Muslim by the names. Nassim is a Muslim name. I was put instantly into a Catholic orphanage. And I always speak about conformity because I always feel like I had to be someone that I wasn't. So already at the orphanage, by going from Nassim to Gabriella is already, for me, lesson number 1. And then I was lucky, though, because I got adopted by a Dutch affluent family in the Netherlands. But they lived all around the world. And, but it all sounds like a fairy tale, but it wasn't really a fairy tale in the sense that I have struggled trying to find a way to belong.
And you've gone through much of it alone. Back to the adoption, I think an American couple was going to adopt you, so you were rejected at some point.
Yes.
How old were you?
Somewhere between 6 months and 9 months.
So you didn't remember that?
No.
Do you remember your parents, your adoptive parents? From
The first one or the second one?
The second one.
Yes.
Yes. No, I know. But when you were a scared little girl and went from the nuns
To them.
to them.
For me, part of the story has been told, but what I've always felt is that I held my breath somehow. That somehow, whatever I did, if it turned out, you know, when we all do mischief, and I still do mischief, but I know that nobody will send me back. And if I had been told as a child, and I know this is going to sound funny, but it's true. If I had been told as a child that Holland and Pakistan were so far, I would have never been worried. But you don't know that in your head, right? So in your head you think, oh my God, if I do it wrong this time, that's it.
And I'm assuming there were not a lot of Muslims or not a lot of brown people in Holland.
No.
At the time.
They were all so tall. I mean, most of the kids I came here, I still do, by the way. It's about the height
You'll grow
difference.
up one day.
But, you know, it's not about being different. It's about, and obviously we're going to talk a little bit about bullying, but it's about your difference sets you out from the crowd, and that's the part that you get bullied for. And you don't realize that that's actually a good part, that it's good to be different, that it's good to live in a diverse world. But I didn't want to be diverse. I wanted to be just like all of that.
And most people do, until Steve Jobs came along and said, you know, it's the crazy people that make a difference in the world. But it's true. Fitting in is a big thing.
Yeah.
Having people like you, having people totally accept you, not feeling like an outie.
Yeah, but you only want to fit in because you think that otherwise they won't accept you.
Of
and
course.
That's my message to all these young kids today that are being bullied. It's okay to stand out. It really is.
It's refreshing. And it builds resilience.
It does.
But when it's happening to you, the hurt and the pain, it's not so much fun, as you know.
No.
You were at school in a skirt, and it's just such a horrible incident. You have to tell me. You're in the schoolyard, and you're little, and you're brown, and you're sticking out, and you're being bullied, essentially.
I had just moved from Belgium to Holland, and I thought it was already bad enough in Belgium, but Holland wasn't much easier. But what's really strange is the other day I was telling this story at Community, which is in Surrey, and I was talking to 25 kids between 14 and 21, and I was telling this story. And suddenly I hesitated because it's actually difficult to tell. So you're standing there at the schoolyard, and they were all moving in, right? And I was actually conned into going at that area of the schoolyard, thinking that they actually really wanted to play with me. And I thought, wow, I have 2 new friends. But it ended up that they just wanted to corner me. And the whole class decided it was funny. And they pulled off the skirt, which was really easy to do. And you stood there in your underwear, just mortified. But then there's 2 things you realize. It can't get any worse than the moment that it happens. That's one of the things I realized at the courtyard. And I kept doing one thing that I think every bullied person ever experiences, that is in a situation like that. I was wondering all the time what it was that I did wrong. So it's really strange that you keep looking, the culprit is you.
Right, there's
Because
something wrong with me.
Something wrong with me. What the heck did I do? What put me in this position? My skirt was ugly. I mean, there were thousands of things going through my head, but of course you're scared. My biggest thing was try not to cry, because I thought that was the most pathetic thing to do.
Did anybody come to your aid at that time?
No, it
No.
took really a long time. And then the teachers actually came, one teacher came, and she of course broke it up. And I went home, not telling a thing to my mother, because I just learned how to go really quick behind her when she said, how is school? And she turned actually. And by the time that she turned, I was already upstairs to change my clothes into something different because it had been ripped.
So it was your secret?
It was my
Really?
secret.
Yours alone? Did you tell any of your little friends? Did you have any little friends?
I
Let's
had
start
one,
there.
but she didn't stand up for me because I don't think she dared either.
Perhaps not.
No.
Perhaps not. But the isolation of it all.
The isolation was huge, but I had one advantage that the children of today don't have: cyberbullying. When I went home, there was no repercussion that continued within the home. There was no Facebook, there was nothing. So I felt kind of
Right.
a little bit.
Did you fear the next day, however, when you went to school, something else would happen?
I figured
maybe
out-
a skirt off again, or what were they trying to figure out? Were you brown
Yeah,
everywhere?
they were trying to figure out if I was brown everywhere. I could have told them. I would have even shown
Right.
them.
Just ask me.
Yeah.
I'll let you in on that.
Yeah, children are really easy, you know. I lifted up my shirt quite often.
Sure.
And it wasn't indecent. It's just
No.
because they asked me something and I thought you might as well show it. But what was worse for me is when my mother found out, because first of all, the family then talks. And I felt that they thought I was pathetic. And my mom said, you could have always told me. How can you tell your mom? That my question to everyone out there is, mothers need to understand you cannot tell your family. It's bad enough to go to a counselor, which I didn't have at that time
Right.
either. But to tell your parents means that you're admitting that nobody is your friend.
And you also felt it was your fault,
Yeah.
something you had done wrong. Now here you are, displaced in a sense. However, you did land in the butter, because you're in the fancy home with the beautiful tablecloths and the money in the bank, and a father who's successful. Were they divorced yet? No,
Yes.
they were divorced. So you really did just go home to talk to your mother.
Yeah.
When your parents divorced, did you think that was your fault too?
I was told it was. In
Okay,
the grapevine.
explain that.
Yeah, and well, because
By the aunts and the uncles or the siblings
when,
or whom?
when a marriage is already shaky for whatever reasons, and I won't even guess, but obviously shaky, then children do not solve the problem, as you well know.
I know that, yes.
And whether they're natural children or adopted. So by bringing me into the fold, it didn't help their marriage. It actually put even more pressure because they didn't think. Of course, 1966, I think a lot of people forget. 1966 was rigid. It was a rigid world. It was, everything was for the outside. Catholic upbringing, quite strict. So I
And
think
what will the neighbors think? A lot of that.
Exactly.
Many women didn't get divorced in '66 because of what the neighbors would think, or they just didn't do it. They weren't economically independent, and their lifestyles changed dramatically. And then you thinking, well, if they hadn't adopted me,
Yeah.
maybe that marriage would have worked.
It would have lasted, yeah.
Where was your father in all of this?
My father was in Canada, actually.
Right.
In Ottawa, stationed in Ottawa during this painful experience at school. And my mother was called into school to discuss this. But one of the things that I say when I go out there and I speak to children, and they actually all agree with me, it's that that's the worst thing that can happen. The bullying is one thing. When your mother goes to school and creates fake friends for you because everyone has to then be nice to you, you actually spend the rest of the school year thinking who's friend and who's foe.
Okay.
And that's way harder. And honest, talking to the kids today, grade 6, grade 7, they all agree with me. It's like being a tattletale.
Sure.
It's not helpful.
And as a young child, you don't necessarily want to be buddy-buddy with the principal because I don't know if maybe kids do today, but I spent some time in the principal's office for the wrong reasons. So, and you don't want to be a tattletale, and you don't want your mother, if you're having an issue at school, you so don't want your mother to make a fuss over the hockey coach or what happened to you, and you certainly don't want to land in the newspaper as the girl discriminated against, and that happens more today than before. But as much as your parent loves you and goes there for you, then you're singled out.
You're singled out, but I always felt, I don't not know if this makes sense to you, but if I hadn't been adopted, you go home to someone who actually looks like you too. So I didn't feel, I told my mother this years later, she must have been in her 70s, that because she really asked me, and I said, you're not brown. There's no way I can ever really make you understand. And then she said, that's actually true.
And who am I really?
Yeah.
And who was my mother? And any person who's being adopted who doesn't know, now they're a little better about it. They tell you who it is often, or they'll bring the birth mother in, and you can have a relationship with your birth mother and the parents who adopted you and all of that. But in those days, often they lied.
Yeah.
With you, it'd be tough to lie.
Yeah.
Right?
They couldn't.
Like you're our biological child. We don't know what happened at the hospital. So at some point, step by step, you learn to overcome fear and find yourself and value yourself. And when we come back, we'll talk about that and how you help other kids do that today who have been in similar circumstance, different circumstance. Okay. With all my might, Gabriella Van Rij, our guest.